Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stack Ahead podcast. Today we have Lakshmi joining us. Hi, Lakshmi. Um,
Hey,
to give a quick intro, Lakshmi is an enterprise data architect at Limoneira Company with over 15 years of experience. She has worked on multiple projects, driving business ROI, governance, and engineering. She also is the chapter lead for LA for Women in Data, also runs Interview Mastery Hub, providing new strategies for technical role. So, hi, Lakshmi. Welcome again. Anything you would like to add to this?
thanks. That's perfect, right? I have been doing the enterprise data transformations, especially for the current org, for a while now. The philosophy that I have is governance shouldn't be bottleneck to innovation; it should be catalyst, right? And
Yeah,
outside of the architecture and the data and everything, for me, the biggest thing is human side of data. Like you said, right? I'm very passionate about community
yeah.
and about the women in data, especially. So thank you for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. We are pleased to host you. So I think the first question is gonna be like about your technology origin story. Essentially, like how did you end up here? And like was it something you were always passionate as a young child or going to school? Or did this something came across, hey, I want to build a career in technology and this is something I will love.
Well, it all started when I was 5 years old. I'm just joking. My growing up, my father was an engineer, right, a civil engineer, and I always thought that I would be an engineer. I didn't know what. So I did my bachelor's in mechanical and industrial engineering, and when I came to US a couple of decades back, I it was the boom of .com. So I'm aging myself a little bit here, but then I pivoted into computer science, right? And then I have been full stack engineer for the first few years of my career, and then we wouldn't believe I wrote code in almost both Linux and Windows and
Yeah,
whatever else, Ruby, Groovy, you name it. I probably have written code in it.
yeah,
But eventually, I always kept going back to data. And for the past, I think, 10, 15 years, I've been doing data and from engineering, analytics to the AI world of today. So that's where, if you think that's where my career arc has been.
yeah. No, I think that's a very, very interesting story. I mean, I've heard several, but obviously this is quite, interesting. Like you've written like literally code on Linux and everything you can imagine. So yeah, it's nice. I think like data architecture from where it was definitely evolved. And
Yep.
I think a lot of people still like they want to get things right, but sometimes I think there are still gaps, which always are there, I think. But I think like this episode hopefully will help people a lot more to understand like how they can design better architecture and also take inspiration from your journey. So I think the next question on this would be like, as data systems scale and become more complex, what architectural decisions have you seen that make the biggest, long-term impact? And then what mistakes do teams often underestimate early on?
It's been funny, right? Like as an industry, we get obsessed about the tooling debate. If you log into LinkedIn, there is like some people that are vouching for Snowflake and
Yeah,
Databricks or Fabric, or there's debates about Lakehouse versus Warehouse. But in my experience, the decision that actually moves the needle isn't the tool, it's your metadata strategy, right? I once heard an executive say, "Oh, I have a blank check for CapEx to build out my data stack."
yeah,
Um, I've been in this game for nearly 2 decades, and I can tell you there is no such thing as a blank check, no matter where you are on the corporate scale, be it Fortune 50 or mid market, right? Every dollar eventually has to be justified by the ROI. Early on, I think teams underestimate the tax of undocumented data, and they want to move at mid-market velocity, so they build fast, right? But 2 years later, especially in regulator industries like where I come from, they end up realizing, hey, we spent 80%. 2 years down the line, they spend 80% of the time trying to figure out where a single metric came from, right? Which is a problem. Now your blank check becomes a bottleneck, right? This
Yeah.
is something that I have seen play out from uh, Fortune 50 to fast growing public companies, right? The mistake is seems to be along the lines of we over engineer for a future that doesn't exist yet while
Yeah.
ignoring the governance that we need for now. Most of the time I tell my team and the folks that I mentor that you have to bake governance and lineage into the architecture from day one, right? You aren't building a data platform. If you're not doing that, you're building a data platform, you're building a high interest credit card, right? That will eventually bankrupt your velocity. um,
Yeah.
I mean, the win is modularity, right? You either use bricks or fabric to create a unified audit ready core. That way, your enterprise stays secure and compliant, but individual business units have the freedom to innovate. The decision that actually moves the needle long term and is the one that decides if you're a hero or bottleneck in 3 years is
Yeah.
your metadata strategy. And I mean, real metadata, right? Like the lineage, ownership, business context, not just the glossary that, it's like at the origination of the project and it's one and done, right? It's a living document that you need to keep adding business context to it. That's what I mean when I say metadata. Because, in the end, if your data foundation isn't governed, right, in today's world of Gen AI, your dreams of having the Gen AI are never going to get off the ground, right? You'll just have AI agents hallucinating on top of the mess, and eventually the board will ask, how do we know the data is accurate? And if we say the answer we don't know, that's not the answer they want, and eventually the check gets canceled, right?
Okay.
That's metadata is the one that I would emphasize when you're building the architecture from day one, no matter where you are.
Okay. So what one or two things do you recommend to get what strategies do you recommend for the metadata to get right? And essentially, let's say you're working on a Gen AI project, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we all would have seen 100 posts flying around on LinkedIn. Like literally, it's flooded every day with new things. And obviously, people do post, "Hey, I used this thing and this didn't work and this was hallucinating." So, from your experience, what do you think are two, three things that might actually help if you get your metadata right for building, let's say, an AI agent? What would you say that?
So you're building context, right? That's
Yeah.
what all of your agents or what have you, right? It's the context is very important. So
Hmm.
when you're doing metadata, like how I said, data lineage and business context, you're basically doing the breadcrumbing. That's what your metadata trail is. Any
Hmm.
AI agent or whatever LLM that you choose, that's what it's dependent on. So you don't want to walk into a meeting. I mean, it happened too, right? There are a couple of examples out there that some of the companies try to incorporate agents into their system, which have been hallucinating on bad data, and then it kind of gave corrupt information, right? And
Hmm.
they ended up in trouble. So you have to breadcrumb it in a way that you always keep adding your business context to it, because today you're using if you have ever worked in like we both did, like you always have multiple ERPs, CRMs, things change, right? One they call a ship date, but then when you go into something else, that is actually the one that is a delivery date, or invoice date or something of that sort, right? If you don't add the business context to it, right, you
Yeah.
have to build all of that within your metadata. So that way, when the business users come in, um, they have context. Business context makes it easier for them to understand, right? Be it your Power BI or your Databricks AI BI dashboards or what have you. This is the key. Even when you're in my example, we had some teams come in, consulting teams, and we had business context built in that made it a little bit easier for them to understand the background of the legacy data, right? You walk into any place,
Yeah.
most of the time you wouldn't find any documentation. I
Yeah.
mean, that's been my experience for 20 years. So that's why I think the emphasis, like people talk about on LinkedIn, all of the experts say, hey, documentation is key, but documentation is like one and done, right?
Yeah.
Metadata, you kind of keep maintaining it. It's a living and breathing document of your organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the documentation part never really reaches. I think a lot of times technical teams do, well, I don't say it's happening with everyone, but they do have technical depth. So I guess like the whole time gets a little bit, it gets sunk in like, let's manage this thing first, then we'll think about documentation and becomes like a second thing, then not the top thing probably.
I mean, it's not because I don't think it's because of they don't want to do it. Most of the time, it's that they don't have time or they're on a time crunch and,
Yeah.
multitude of things, right?
Yeah.
In the agile world, it becomes so crazy that it's like, oh, I'll get to it later, but the later never comes. So
Yeah.
that's what I'd say when I say, hey, governance need to be baked in from day one. That's what I mean. Like you need to incorporate as you keep building it. It's kind of like in the past we used to say TDD, right? Test driven
Hmm.
development. So bake it in. So
Yeah.
it becomes like an organic behavior.
Behavior. Yeah. Okay. Great. So I think we'll move on to the next question, which is also sort of inspired by this question. So how has your experience as a women leading teams in like data space influenced the way you design, govern, or advocate data architecture within your organization or maybe other organizations you have worked in the past?
I mean, being a woman in data and especially leadership, like, right, taught me especially that there is a executive reality and then there is a ground reality, right? There is a gap between then they'll kill your data strategy faster than any technical failure. What I mean by that is sometimes data roadmap discussions would include similar roles like directors talking to directors or above, right? And what executives here are hearing was a filtered and sanitized version of what's actually happening three levels below, right?
Mm.
And then it would be shocking when you get that beautiful strategy and then it doesn't get adopted, right?
Yeah.
So I've been in rooms where the planning, where we are planning a massive data platform migration, and nobody thought to either check with the analyst who will have to train on the new tools or designing governance policies without talking to the people who has to enforce them daily.
Yeah.
Uh, Typically that would end up like you're designing for a theoretical organization or you're nice to have that doesn't exist, right? And I have been in these rooms, and so that gave me a perspective because I knew that what it felt like, right, to have an insight and that got dismissed or not to be part of the conversation, not being invited to be part of that conversation in the first place. I mean, I learned that if you aren't intentionally including voices from the margins, you are not designing for the blind spots, right? Um,
Yeah.
that's, I think, has shaped my philosophy in how I see it in today's world when I get into the room and try to build this architecture, right? So I make a conscious choice to build inclusive roadmaps. When I'm planning data strategy or architecture, it all starts at the strategy, right? So I'm talking to everyone that touches data, right?
Yeah.
We everybody in the org uses data, right? The junior data engineer might know where the technical debt is, or the analyst from the compliance side knows which reports are actually used and which one are the zombie process that somebody left it there and nobody has touched it in like 5, 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So everybody within the organization needs and uses data. So I see my job as to meet their needs, not to just build what sounds like an impressive tech stack or something that looks cool when you do it on a slide deck, when you do an executive presentation, right? For me, empathy is the key. You have to understand problem from the perspective of people who are actually living them.
Yeah.
So that's the technical architecture matters, but if it doesn't really reflect your ground reality, it's just an expensive infrastructure that nobody uses, right?
Yeah. I think that's a very detailed, I think, answer also, and I think kind of relatable in many ways because it does happen a lot. Like anybody who is touching data from like even periphery, like even in edge, I think their perspective needs to be included because sometimes like there are things they might have noticed as well, which gets missed. So I think it's a very nice perspective on it. So looking back at your career, what pivotal moments or decisions have helped you to move, from like an individual contributor to maybe like leading and influencing teams and then strategy? And basically strategies will you suggest to anybody to, like make their voice heard when let's say they are in those spaces?
Well, for the longest time, right, I considered myself as a high performing IC, right,
Yeah,
individual contributor who didn't think of myself as a leader. I was focused on doing the work, solving the problems, delivering outcomes. I don't know if you know, there is this quote from Indira Gandhi, I think, that captures this perfectly. I might be butchering it. There are two kinds of people. This is her quote. And those who do the work, there are two kinds of people. There's those who do the work and those who take credit, right? Try to be in the first group. There's less competition there. So that's what I grew up on. I was absolutely in the first group, right? Like
yeah,
trying to deliver and all of that. So when I laid the foundation and the roadmap for our enterprise data warehouse towards delivery, I was doing strategic work, right? Just because that's part of what I was doing, influencing systems, strategy, defining architecture that would serve the business for years. I just didn't recognize it as leadership yet, right? And then when COVID hit, I the industry that I was in is supply chain, right?
yeah,
And supply chain, as we know, collapsed globally. And the need of the hour was getting real time data to our supply chain operations so they could keep running,
yeah,
right? I assessed situation, established direction, and drew solutions, right? Uh, then it hit me, right? I'm the strategic leader. I just wasn't owning it or leaning into it at that point. I mean, I moved from managing data to managing the fiduciary trust for the enterprise. So
yeah,
that's what I tell women in the Interview Mastery Hub or women in data that I mentor, that you don't need to have the title to be the leader, right? If you're assessing the crisis and defining the systems that move the business, you're already the strategist in the room, right? You need to own the impact of your own work, lean into it.
yeah. Okay, yeah, I think that does make sense. Also, it's a very I think somebody else also on the podcast couple of episodes ago said similar thing. I mean, not obviously in the technical space, but then like in generally other spaces as well.
Okay.
I think the next question probably would also be influenced by this answer. So, like, what challenges have you faced navigating, like, say, these roles? And then how did you, like, for example, build credibility or confidence, like, over the course of time? I think it's gonna be helpful for people who are gonna be listening this, maybe like early careers, juniors, mid-level, and take that inspiration with them.
What challenges have I faced? There are multiple, right? I think in 20 years or 2 decades, it's a long list. But I
Yeah,
think the biggest challenge, what I think is what I call is complexity scale or complexity trap. And it differs based on the company scale, right? I worked from Fortune 50 to mid market. And at really large companies, you have so much governance and processes and red tape, right? That makes innovation crawl.
yeah,
at the mid market, everyone moves at a startup speed. Um, but you can do that if you're a public company with SOX requirements and audit obligations, right? I've been in uh, most of the times I've been the only woman in technical leadership rooms trying to explain we can move fast, but we can't break things when regulatory risk is on the table, right?
Yeah.
That's something uh, that is kind of hard to explain to the auditors and eventually to the SEC and things like that, right? I build credibility by becoming what I call a scale bridge. I just I stopped just talking about data architecture, right, and started talking about risk mitigation and ROI. And when I show up to the stakeholders, I don't just show the platform strategy, but also how it insulates the company from compliance failures, whether we're enabling faster analytics or the conversational analytics with the current AI agents and things like that. That seems to have a better impact. um, you're managing business risk, right? My
Yeah.
confidence came from two places. First is what I call, for anybody listening, you have to have, this is something that I have read somewhere. I'm copying from, I can't remember, so I will not be able to give you context of who said it, but this is something that I like very much. Um, I built something that I call a personal board of directors, which is like finding mentors who had navigated similar challenges, right? Like what I have been going through, right? They could tell me, hey, this is normal, here's how to handle it, or this is abnormal, here's how you would approach it, right? Having
Yeah.
them really helped me to kind of guide through it. And second, giving back to the community, right? Organizing all of these events that we do, and taught me the confidence is like not in the single knowing every line of code. It's about knowing your unique value, right? Mentoring basically helped me realize I can bridge the gap between what the business cares about, like the ROI, and what the engineer cares about. Right? Once you own that bridge, you kind of own the room. So, if anybody listening, give back to the community, and I have heard it so many times in the mentorship that I do. Hey, I don't know what to do when if I can mentor. I mean, everybody can be a mentor, right?
Yeah.
Somebody always is looking for a word of advice, a shoulder to lean on. So you can give back always. That always helps. It's like the circle that helps you. So those are my two things. If anybody wants
Yeah.
to take away from this.
Yeah. I think that's a very good strategy. I would say. I think the second one is quite like I think yeah, I also think it's personally good in a way because different people have different experiences and then
Yes.
they can obviously
Yeah.
give you some insight into how they navigated, for example, any scenario. So
Yeah, the
definitely
perspectives, right?
yeah,
Now everybody has their own unique perspective for a scenario. And then the more you talk to people, you can understand, hey, there is this option or, XYZ or, something like that.
yeah,
Or it just boosts your confidence, right? And then it helps you feel good when you give back.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it's a good one. So we are on the last question for this segment and so obviously I'm sure you have heard all about where AI is and things. So I think this is one of the most like it's a question I ask almost everybody. I would say the other questions are obviously different. And it's like what skills do you think? For example, somebody who is graduating today, like maybe pursuing bachelor's, master's, or whichever degree they are in, they should focus on, I wouldn't say 5 years, but like maybe like in next couple of years, so that like they stand out, for example, in the job market, if they're looking for a role, let's say in data, maybe like an engineer, data architect, or data scientist, maybe. And then like what two, three skills on the top of your mind you will suggest like they should like build first.
Oh, wow. um, I kind of looking at the market right now
Yeah.
and the trends, and I mean, it's been crazy, like the way that
Yeah.
everything's moving so fast, right?
Yeah.
I mean, again, for me, human in the loop is very important. So I would say the skill that's going to matter isn't purely technical. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, it is technical to somewhat, but it's not like 100% technical. At some point, it used to be. It
Yeah.
used to be like you're a T-shape expert and you're deep in one vertical, and then you are kind of considered the expert, right? But what I'm seeing, or what I think in the next 5 to 10 years, is the market is looking for E-shaped expert in the age of Gen AI. What I mean by the E shape is you need depth in one area. For me, because I come from architecture and governance, that could be the vertical bar. If you think of E like this is your vertical bar, and then you have three here, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe like this.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you would have your multiple, those three would be understanding business, compliance risk, or, multiple domains, risk management, stakeholder communication. Those would be your horizontal bars. And the critically, it's your ability to connect all of those um, multiple things to your vertical, right? Like this vertical bar is where
Yeah.
I see the merge is happening in the next 5 to 10 years, because every company is going to adapt AI in the next 5 to 10 years. But the wins, but the ones that can win, right, would be the ones who have moved fastest. But they not just the fastest, but they will be the ones. The wins would be with the ones who have moved safely with compliance, right? Someone needs to be in the room who has deep knowledge, but I can also bridge the business risk, regulatory requirements, and the executive concerns, is what I think is where in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. I think it's a good set of recommendations. Okay. So I think with that, segment comes to an end. So now we're gonna start the rapid fire questions.
Oh, oh.
They're gonna be a bunch of questions. You have to give like a one word answer. I mean, you can give 3 words, but like you don't have to explain, just like one word. So I think it's
Okay.
gonna be pretty simple. Okay.
Okay, let's try it. I mean, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's see.
Okay. So star schema or snowflake schema?
Star schema. My architecture and governance says depends, right?
Depends. Okay. So yeah, the answer is depends. Okay. Um, lake, warehouse, or lake house?
Again, it's all a business scenario, right? It depends. Right? You can have a lake house and
Yeah.
then warehouse, and um,
Okay.
probably lake house without it being a swamp, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. So which programming language would you work with if you have an option? R or Python?
I think Python. I mean, I have never worked on R. I
Okay.
have written in so many languages, but not on R. So maybe bias
Yeah,
Python.
cool. What's your first programming language that you learned?
Ever learned?
Okay.
Is that ever learned, or is it something at work?
Okay.
In school? Which one? Which one are you asking?
I mean, in school, I mean, the first way, wherever you learned, like if it was in school or engineering or wherever, like you had first, in like, first that,
Oh,
aha moment.
it would be, I think, in my computer engineering class. The first language that they taught was Fortran. I don't even know why they did that.
Fortran. Okay. Oh, wow. That's
And it's not, I mean, it wasn't even used at that time. But then the professor was like, "You gotta learn Fortran." I'm like, "Why?" But that's what it was.
yeah. What's the one word that comes to your mind when you think of data lineage? Like one single word.
Metadata,
Metadata. Okay. One single word that comes to your mind when you think of data quality. Please don't say met.
governance,
Yeah, I was like,
governance.
don't say meta. Okay, cool. Your go-to partitioning strategy?
It again depends.
Okay.
It's a singular one.
Okay. And the last question is, if there was one language and there's a choice that this is the only language you have to use till like wherever you are, until whenever you are in a like working as a data architect, what will be that language? Programming language I'm talking about.
That's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
I think it would be SQL because I see it as one of the OG natural language kind of.
Yep.
It's like select start from kind of thing. So
Yeah.
probably that's where I would lean to.
Great. Great. I think I would have also done the sequel, by the way. If like somebody asked me. I mean, I do like other languages too, but like if somebody gave me just one language to pick from, then I would say yes, let's go with it because
Yeah.
it's yeah, it is a really nice language to interact with databases. Great. So with that, we come to the end of our podcast today. You will find this podcast on my YouTube channel. I'll put the link in the comment section. And thanks again, Lakshmi, for coming on this show and being a part of
Oh,
it.
thank you. Thank you for having me.